Well, Prime Minister Mark Carney says getting the best possible deal with the U.S. in ongoing trade talks is more important than Donald Trump's August 1st deadline. Carney told Canada's premiers at their meeting yesterday in Huntsville that the federal government is, quote, only going to accept the best deal for Canada. So let's talk more about this. Scott Reid, CTV News political commentator and principal at Scott Reid, joins us this morning once again. Scott, we talked yesterday about what may come out of yesterday. Did we get much more clarity other than that, Carney's going to fight for the best deal for Canada?
We didn't get a lot of clarity as to where the talks sit, what precisely is on the table, what demands are being made. But we got an interesting hint as to the Prime Minister's sense of enthusiasm. And, as you mentioned in your opening there, really clearly signaling that our expectations around August 1st may need to be tempered, that maybe August 1st isn't going to be a deadline. And we also heard this, by the way, from the Treasury Secretary for Donald Trump, talking about the fact that deals around the world that the U.S. are trying to strike, including Canada, may or may not be completed by August 1st. Even more importantly, I think, if you take the sum of what the Prime Minister had to say with the premiers, very much a focus on Plan B, very much a focus on, well, what if we don't get a deal, or what if we cannot secure a deal that is satisfactory for Canada, and how we have to therefore focus on getting our own economic act together and finding other alternative partners to trade with. So you really feel the expectations being managed down.
Mm-hmm. So that's a real communications challenge, right? Because he's the prime minister of our country, speaking not only to, the premiers, but also Canadian business owners, businesses and people who are employed, have jobs, are concerned about their jobs here. The balance they're trying to strike here and trying to maybe temper expectations and sort of expand on this. How complicated of a job is that with all this uncertainty surrounding Trump and tariffs?
Look, there's a front of house and back of house challenge here. Both of them are complicated. The front of house is what we're talking about, is the way in which the Prime Minister is trying to communicate with Canadians and with business leaders and union leaders about what we might expect and how tough the outcome might be. Could there be no deal at all? Could there be a deal where there's a large tariff rate? We just saw a deal with Japan struck, which is going to have a 15% across the board tariff rate. A couple of Asian countries, 19% across the board tariff rate. Clearly, the White House is signaling that any deal it does, it wants a big tariff rate across the board. And so will Canada be able to tolerate that? But the back of the house, the other complicated part, is in fact these discussions. We know that a delegation is going to Washington today, led by Dominic LeBlanc, who's really been point man in cabinet. His chief of staff, the Prime Minister's new chief of staff, will be there as well, our ambassador. These seem like they are actual talks. These seem like they're getting down to the nub of this with 9 days left before that deadline. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But it feels like it's a very complex, very complicated set of talks where Trump doesn't feel like anybody has any leverage over him, and that he holds, as he loves to say, all of the cards. So we may not get a deal. It could be just that simple. There may not be a deal worth taking.
And that leads me to my next question, and it's something I know I've heard you discuss before as well, Scott. It's just this whole idea of, Trump holds the cards. Trump sort of, does things clearly, as we see, on a whim here. He's the one who signed the last free trade deal, the updated CUSMA. He's the one who said it was like the best deal ever, with pen to paper or whatever, euphemism he used there. Even getting a deal signed, what guarantees does Canada have that he doesn't just decide to change it anyway?
Whether it's on television or sitting around over coffee, I talk with people about this constantly. What is the virtue of a deal with Donald Trump? How can you hold him to his word? How can you be secure in his word? And it's a reasonable question. I guess the hope has to be, but notwithstanding his, unreliable and unstable manner, that if he actually secures a new deal, he will, at least for a period of time, stand by it. And that can provide to our industry and to investors some measure of security, which boils down to those people who are working in those industries. Think about steel, think about auto, think about manufacturing, maybe some sense of at least predictability for a short period of time. But as you say, who's to say? Something pisses him off and boom, we could be back in jeopardy, because that's just the way he rolls.
Yep. It's interesting times we live in. Scott Reid, always appreciate chatting with you about these sort of times. CTV's political commentator, Scott Reid, thank you.